Good evening, everybody. I'm so glad to welcome you all tonight to tonight's Accessibility NYC Meetup. My name is Stacy Smith. For those of you that don't know me, I'm one of the co-organizers of the Meetup, and I also work at Equal Entry. And I'm very pleased to welcome you tonight and to present Damien Senger from the Netherlands, who's going to give us a great presentation tonight. Lower literacy, it's not the user, it's the product. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping announcement type things. We live caption these meetups. So we use CART, communication access relative to translation, and we are very grateful to have our partners with this from White Coat Captioning, and Diane Scott is doing the live captioning for us. So very big thank you to Diane. Also, we'll be live streaming this, and as we do for all of our meetups, and you can check our YouTube page for past examples of our meetups. We're very grateful to Jolly McPhee from the Internet Society, who's doing all of the live stream producing. And also, I'd like to thank our event sponsors, Thoughtbot, which is our sort of host event space where we are today, and also Equal Entry, Adobe, Level Access. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Damien, and let's get started. Thanks.
Thank you. So I hope that the slide will work correctly. Like, it was kind of a challenge to make it work. So let's see. So lower literacy, it's not the user, it's the product. Sorry. Yep. Just to see now. Yes. So if I'm asking you to think about what would be the perfect reading experience for you, most of the time, like when I'm asking all my friends, I'm getting the same kind of answer. I'm sorry for the tooltip. Yeah, it's okay. So I'm getting the same kind of answer. You can think about this kind of experience being on your couch, just with a book, in your home place, like something quite chill. Some other people prefer to be, for example, in a park, completely disconnected from everything else in your life. You can also prefer to go to a nice and warm coffee shop to get like a warm cup of tea, for example, and to read with a light atmosphere and the light music. If you ask me what is my perfect reading experience, it's something like this. It's a crowded train when I'm going back from work with a lot of people around me reading like other books, other newspaper, being on the phone, having discussion, something loud, something just switching off my mind. But there is one common thing with all the experience. They are about books. And most of the time when we're reading, in fact, it's on our screens. So let's see, how do we read on screens? And by the way, hi, so I'm Damien. I'm a digital designer specialized in accessibility, living in Rotterdam, which is next to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And I work for Castor EDC, which is a startup helping health researchers to gather information about the patient during medical and health studies, where I'm doing design system mainly and accessibility. And I use they, them pronouns. So, in general, I try to never speak with people, so it's kind of a small break today, but like feel free to ask me any question in the end. And good to know, like all the slides of this talk are already available online, so if you want just to follow or whatever, like it's already on speaking.raccoon.studio or just like noticed, it's the same website. So let's talk about readability. And first, one of the questions is why speaking about readability? Because reading is everything except an easy thing. It's something we're doing since our young age. Like most of us learn how to read, speak English in primary school or in high school or whatever, but it's something we're doing for a lot of time. And in fact, even if it's something we can see as quite easy because we're doing it like almost all the time, our brain cannot stop reading stuff on the wall, on your phone, on advertisement, everywhere. It's not easy. It's involving a lot of processes in your brain. And one of the issues with all of this is the fact that the web is mainly text-based. So it's mainly based on reading. And a text is not accessible per se. So even if we're trying to do everything we can to make it accessible, the text can always be a barrier because it's not your language or just because you have struggled to read the text. And to be really quick on this, there is like two big kinds of impairment, group of impairment, which can allow us, disallow you to read a text. The first one is obviously the vision impairment. So these are the one I will not talk about today. So going from visual distraction to blindness. But the one I will focus more about are the cognitive impairments. So I like to use the Microsoft or whatever, like the inclusive design framework, and going from like the permanent impairment to the more situational one. Like example of more permanent ones: dyslexia, hyperlexia, or autism and ADHD, which are the one I will focus on today. But my case, for example, fluency can also be an issue when you try to read a text, because you're not maybe used to all the vocabulary that we find in a specific text, or just stressful content. I will talk a lot about airports. Airports are definitely the kind of stressful context where even if you don't have any literacy issue, you can be in a context where it can be difficult to find information, to read information, or just to like find where is the gate for your plane. So on all of this, a quick focus on dyslexia and lower literacy. Why? Because in 2013, one of the statistics made by the US Department of Education was the fact that 33% of the US population is having a degree of low literacy. It does not mean that people cannot read, it's just that people can experience difficulty reading or looking and finding information in a text. It can be like a lot of different experiences, but basically it's almost half of the population. And not all the population is online. So Nielsen, from the Norman Nielsen group, had a statistic that something like 1/3 of web users are having a degree of low literacy. And if you take one specific part of this, which is dyslexia, it's more or less 10% of the global population having like a degree of dyslexia. So like a lot of cognitive impairment, it's a spectrum. So it's going from having some issues recognizing sounds, for example, in words, to really struggling to analyze a text. But it's more or less 10%. It's kind of the same in all the Western countries, except for the Nordics in Europe, like Sweden, Norway, Denmark, where it's almost 15 to 17, and mainly due to the way the language are built. And like a lot of cognitive disabilities or cognitive impairment, it's always coming in groups. So a lot of time it's common, like it's associated with ADHD, autism, dyscalculia. Like there is a statistic saying that for people with ADHD, there is almost half of the people having 1 degree of dyslexia. So it's really something going in groups. And yeah, that's quite annoying. And also I was saying that we were, most of us, reading, for example, English since childhood, but it's not always coming from childhood. It can also appear, this kind of reading impairment, after stroke, after traumatic brain injuries, and all this kind of cognitive issues that you can have during your life. And because we are all going to grow old, we may all experience this. So yeah, this was about like statistic on dyslexia. But one of the things I really would love people to understand is the fact that dyslexia is not only about reading. So it's a struggle with associating sounds with meaning, but it's not only an issue for people when they start to read texts. For example, there is like a lot of interesting different way to to solve challenges for people with dyslexia. Like if you're asking dyslexic people like me to answer a problem or to find information on the websites, we can see that for example, the eye trackings or the kind of journeys that people are doing on the website are completely different from regular, in a way, users that we can have on our websites. So it's not only about reading, it's more about finding information. And because on the web we're not reading like word per word, the idea is really trying to find different ways to access the information. And why I'm interested about dyslexia, it's because if you, like every time in accessibility, if you manage to find a good experience for people having like permanent disabilities or impairment, you can enhance the experience for everybody. So, now, how do we read? And the first thing about how do we read for me is the fact that reading is not about letters. It's about sound. Reading is a music. And it's the case when you're reading out loud, but it's also the case when you're just reading a book. Because when you're reading a book or when you're reading on screen, you're hearing what is the text that you're currently reading. So reading is about sound. And dyslexia is a phonological issue because it's a struggle in the association between sound and meaning. So reading is mainly a phonological process. And that's one of the reasons why the reading experience changes a lot depending on the context. And it depends on what you prefer, but because you need to hear your voice and you need to focus on your voice or on the voice that you're projecting on the specific text, this can be altered by the context. And it's not always about your voice, and that's why the context can be important, because it's also about what kind of emotion do you want to project in a text. And if you start to look at an advertisement, and I'm like thinking about the voice of one of your favorite actor, the kind of emotion that you will get from this text will be completely different from just your voice. So this is the kind of element to understand about reading. And reading is everything except linear. And it's mainly because like our eyes are like kind of a ball with 6 different muscles, and the way that we need to move the muscles to read a line is by doing small rotations. And because of that, we're reading with something called saccades. So it's the idea that every time our eyes are moving from one position to another in the sentence. And during like these jumps, we are like stopping on specific group of letters, and this stop is called a fixation. So a fixation is something really quick. It's like less than a third of a second, so really, really quick, but it's really important for the reading experience because basically it's where the reading is happening. During a fixation, the idea is that we are like jumping on a group of letters and everything else is becoming blurry. And we will mainly see like what is the group of letter, but just shape around this group of letter. And every few fixations, we need a small break because all of this is taking a lot of energy for our brain. It's like a lot of different movement for our muscle. So we need a small break. And this break always happens in white space in a page or white space in a screen. So saccades, fixations, and breaks. And in the reading experience, what is really important is the size of the saccades and the duration of the fixation. And when we try to do eye tracking, for example, and to see what is the most readable experience, the idea is to check this, like the duration of a fixation. The shorter the fixation is, the better the experience is. Because if you don't need a lot of time on the fixation to understand what is the group of letter, what is the sound, and what's the meaning of everything around, you can easily go to something else. So duration of fixation and size of saccades. And when browsing websites, the idea is that we're not reading just sentences. We're looking for information. And we can see that in all the eye tracking because we're using something called the exploratory reading pattern. And it's the idea of we're just like going from a specific part of the text to other part. We will see that. But this is one really important part of the reading experience because when you have users with lower literacy, you cannot jump from one part of a text to another one. Because to do that and to jump from group of words to other group of words, you need to understand what's the meaning of the text, but you also need to understand your expectation about it. And like when you have users with lower literacy, the idea is that we will never see an exploratory reading pattern. We will see more something like in a book. So reading a full sentence and rereading again to find like the meaning of the sentence. And so 2 different reading behavior, one which will be scanning and the other one which will be plowing. I don't know if I can say that this way, but yeah. And the idea is the fact that when you're plowing in a text, when you really have to scrap for the information, you're also, all your view is narrowing to really the text that you're trying to to read and to understand, which is having some kind of issues for users to find information which are not part of the text. So navigation, information in asides block, and all this kind of thing. So if we take a paragraph like this one, which is the introduction of the WCAG that I hope people know by heart, the idea is the fact that you will have first on eye tracking most of the time with the exploratory pattern, people going from one part of the paragraph to the other part and trying to understand what is the shape and what is the information within the paragraph. And once you have a good idea of what are the kind of information within the paragraph, people will focus on what is interesting for them. For example, here, like the cooperation, goal of providing, everything around the goal word, for example, because you're trying to understand what is this text about. Then you need a break because this is a lot of energy for our brain. And then before coming back, looking for other information, seeing if we're finding or not what we're looking for before going to the next paragraph. So on eye tracking, this is the kind of pattern that we're seeing most of the time on internet. Because first we're analyzing, then we're starting to read only what's interesting for us. So basically, we are not reading on a word by word manner or word per word. And that's the reason why you can definitely read this quite easily, despite the misspelling, because basically you don't have to read every word entirely. And this is due to the letters identifying features. So the identifying features are basically like the ascendant and the descendant of letters. So like the upper part and the lower part. And these are the letters, like the identifying part creating the shape of a word. And it's thanks to this shape that we can easily read the second line, but not the first one when we remove some part of the content. Because most of the time in Western languages, the identifying features are on the top level. It's the case for most of the diacritic, for example, so all the accent in French, for example, or in Swedish. And most of the time, there is not too much meaning in the lower part of a letter. So on the first line, it can be quite difficult to see the difference between an I and an R, for example, because you don't see what it is if you don't understand the word itself. And these identifying features are really important because that's what we're trying to analyze to understand the meaning of a word. So if we take readability, for example, yes, the yellow is appearing. So we have a system where there is like few ascendant and one descendant. It's a shape we can easily recognize, like there is a shape. If you write uppercase, there is not a real shape, and that's one of the reasons why uppercase, it's really hard to read. But for the misspellings that we were discussing before, it's using this kind of shape, but not only. So if you can recognize problem and as problem in the kind of, like if you have a misspelling, but not pebleorm, it's mainly because of the shape. The shape is almost exactly the same for problem, almost, like it's a bit bigger for like the top part, but it's almost the same, which is not the case for pebleorm. But as I told you before, reading is about sounds. So it's not only the shape that the shape that we need to look here, but also the sound. And we have two syllables for problem. We have also two syllables for porbelm, but we have three different syllables for pebleorm. And this is the kind of issue that you can have with dyslexia, for example. For most of the user, it will be quite easy to identify porbelm as problem because the sounds are almost the same. But because dyslexia is a struggle associating sound with meaning, the fact that they are different will create a different experience and a different meaning for users with dyslexia. And it's one of the reasons why, like when letters are looking a lot the same, like M, N, or B and D, people with dyslexia will have struggled to identify clearly what is the meaning of this word, because the sound is almost the same. In your mouth, like the way doing a B and a D is almost the same, and the letter is writing almost the same. So that's one of the reasons why, finding meaning for dyslexic people can be harder. So this is one eye tracking showing like the fixation and the saccade that I told you before. And it's on an article on the 9/11 Tribute Center in Lower Manhattan. But what we can see, and what is really interesting for me on this one, is to see the pattern of reading, which is not only the pattern that we've seen before in the paragraph, but also like between two paragraphs, how people are reading this text, and the fact that, in fact, they are not. And it's not working because it's not in my keynote, but one of the interesting stuff, one second. Oops, no, okay, I cannot do that. Sorry, I will show you at the end, is the fact that people are reading the first two paragraphs, like the first part of the first paragraph and the first part of the second paragraph, but in the rest of the eye tracking, people are only focusing on bold text and the beginning of each list item. Because people are looking for information, seeing in the first two paragraphs, is it really about what I'm looking for? And if it's the case, just trying to find the information. Minimal effort to get access to it. So, based on how do we read and the idea of minimal effort to access information, how can we make our experience readable? And for me, the best way to learn how to make an experience readable is to look at airport signs. I love airports. I definitely love these kind of places because it's a stressful place. It's one of the only places where my brain can just switch off and not like bothering me anymore. And at the same time, it's like a place where there is a purpose. You know that you need to do something. You will either get your plane or like go in the city that you just like arrived in, or look for someone. So everything is explained on signs. You don't have to think, just to follow. And a lot of effort was put into this kind of signs, mainly because you will never know what is the language of someone in your airport. Especially, for example, in Amsterdam, we have the Schiphol International Airport, which is like the third airport now in Europe. So basically a transfer airport more than like a tourism airport. And you will never know what is the language spoke by someone. So airport sign needs to be understandable by like virtually everybody. And if we're taking like a closer look to this kind of signs, we can learn a lot. First, the fact that even without knowledge of the language, you need to find information. And to do that, the only way that they're managed to find is using images and signs. So every time there is an important information, you will always have a sign with it, a small images, a small icon. And it will always be the same. So all across the journey, like when you will walk into the airport, it will always be the same icon. Then you will find like exactly the kind of information you're looking for, and quite quickly. So if you have your boarding pass, you need to go to C5, for example. You know that you need to look for C something. And that's the idea here. All the letters, which is the information that people are looking for, are just incredibly big with, in a smaller size, what is exactly the information related to that. But there is a good hierarchy of information. And then, a bit after, you can see like bigger size, like bigger signs. Why? Because they need to adapt to the environment. They need to adapt to the context. You're not anymore like saying that it will be in this direction, it's here. You need to see that it's here. So big sign, and all the information which is not useful is removed. So adapting the information to the context. And if you take a step back again, you can see that the information is also always the same with the same wording. So it's gate, gate. And you can also find this in signs with, for example, a bathroom. A toilet, if it's a toilet in the beginning, will stay a toilet and will not become WC or bathroom. Like there is always a consistency in the wording. Because if you don't speak the language, you're looking for the shape of it. You're looking for something which is closely with the same letters, even if it's like if you don't recognize the meaning of it. So from this kind of view, there is the idea of the 4 C's of readability. And the first one is the idea of continuity. So you're repeating the information from the beginning to the end. And like just behind the closed caption, you would see like 3 different times this sign again. Why? Because like between each sign, there is a new door. And there is new people coming from a plane joining this hallway. So they need access to the information. But also people, it's an airport, are stressed. So they need to be reassured. And to do that, it's always the same information. It's the good way. You can continue. And repeating the information over and over and over again. And you can do the same with a checkout, for example. When you're repeating the information exactly the same way, it's the same idea. Like even if people are like understanding that they need to go this way, it's just like decreasing the amount of stress by explaining the information the same way to not create confusion. The second one is the idea of conspicuity. And here it will be the idea that something is really easily noticeable. There is a lot of signs on this picture. Like there is a sign for the train, there is a sign for the plane, there is a sign for the first head and the baggage storage, there is one for the toilets, there is one for the emergency exit, there is one for the information airport, and there is another one on here, which is exactly the same as the train one. A lot of information. But still, you can easily see what kind of information is what. Because each thing, like you can see that the yellow is everything related to plane, that's everything related to train is blue, which is allowing you to, even if you don't see exactly what is written on the other side, you can see that it's naar de treinen and to the train, because it's just exactly the same sign as this one. And that's the idea of the conspicuity with the continuity. It's always noticeable, you can easily see it even from afar, and because it's the same sign, the same text, you can understand it. Then the consistency. As I said before, a toilet will stay a toilet. If people are looking for a bar or a restaurant, and you're like getting the information once restaurant and then bar, they will not know if they're still following the good thing. They could also ask themselves, did I miss the restaurant? And is it now another bar that I'm like going to? So always the same wording from one end to the other. It's not really SEO friendly, but it's user friendly. So that's better. And the last one, clarity. Here, like they really want you to understand that please don't go to the left because you cannot transfer. And to be sure, there is transfer on the right, but there is also the fact that it's an exit and you cannot transfer. There is transfer which is crossed and no connecting flight, red signs, you cannot. It's maybe a bit too much, maybe, but it's clear. And if you don't understand that, like for example, what is a connecting flight, you can see transfer. You can see the plane on the other side. Like there is explanation a lot, but to be sure that people, whatever the kind of information they're looking for about the transfer, they will at least understand one. The icon, the wording, or just the fact that you need to be careful and ask someone before doing a mistake. So that's the idea behind clarity. Just being clear and removing everything else. They don't speak about the train on the platform that you can find after the exit. They don't speak about, like they don't say something about the buses. They don't say something about like all the experience that you will have after these 2 doors. Just the fact that now there is a choice to make. And these are just the information that you need to do that. The idea of clarity. And for that, I love the Schiphol airport. So thanks Paul Maxena, which is the designer who created all the signage in Schiphol and wrote like a tremendous book on readability thanks to that. So now the question is, we have like 4 principles. How can you apply this to our web content? And first, really, please, open dyslexia is not a solution. It can help some people, like it's a good typeface, but it's not a solution to people finding information. It's, if the user needs open dyslexia, they will have it on their computer and they will already replace all the font on the browser with this one. So offering a button on the website to say dyslexic friendly version, that's not really a solution. And it's not a solution, especially because when it's about cognitive disabilities, but even more when it's about literacy, there is no one-fits-all solution. So no one-fits-all solution for the font face, but just for the text. Like basically, I'm always struggling with this because I like the idea of internet is one medium. Like responsive web design is amazing for that. One code base, a lot of different results based on the same experience. Same content, you don't remove all of this. But if you want an experience which is really readable, the idea is also to offer a different way to access the information. It can be offering PDF for some people, for example, because in this case, they can download the information, and even if there is no network, you can access it, or just reading in other devices. There is amazing ebook readers for dyslexic people, which are like removing most of the information that is not useful, changing the backgrounds and all this kind of stuff. There is a lot of plugins also doing this. So unfortunately, the one-fits-all solution is not existing on this one. And the idea is just to think about all the different ways you can offer the content to people. And sometimes it's not about creating a new format like PDF or ebook. It's also about the information that you have on the page. How can you offer it differently other than the text? It can be adding images. It can also be adding charts, for example, or providing videos and audio. Like videos and audio, it's always complicated for accessibility reason because it's a real cost if you want to be especially AAA, but it's just offering a way to people to choose what they're the most comfortable with. And this is quite important. And one of the things with readability is the fact that readability is offering all the different ways possible to get access to the information, not only through text. So what? Is it done? No. There is few advices that I can give you based on several studies, especially a lot of studies made in Barcelona in a really nice university department. The first one is the fact that a good contrast is like really needed, but not too much contrast. That's one of the things. Like black and white is what people prefer. In all studies, when you try to do eye tracking and ask people to give to rank their experience, they will always choose black and white. But when you're like trying to see this eye tracking and to see what is the average duration of fixation, we can see that in fact black text on white is not what is the most like restful for the eye. But sometimes using like shade of grays is more readable, or at least more restful for people. And especially because black and white on screen can create this kind of blur effect around the letters. Because you send a lot of light in here, you're activating like a lot of small pigments. I don't know the English word for the, like in your eyes, like the, yes. So like you're sending a lot of lights, which is like asking your brain and your eyes to do a lot of effort to get access to information. So creating this kind of blur effect. And having some shade of black. So it's something coming from the print world, but the idea that you have like different kind of black in the print world. You have like the full black, which is when you use like black ink, but also all the three primary ink together. And the idea of like a more grayish black, which is just using black ink. And it's the same a bit for the web, except that we cannot use a shade of black. We need to use like some shade of grays. And this study from the University of Barcelona is showing that most of the time, like something really close to black, like the hexadecimal code 111 or this kind of colors can be more restful for the eye. But what is really helpful is not using white, because the idea is still to send less light to our eyes. And for this, using beige or this kind of yellowish color, like old paper, for example, is way more readable, and people start, like especially dyslexic people, have a better reading experience on this. But aside of the color, the font time also have an impact. for a lot of time, we were like, serification is great, because on the book, we were using serification. Like all the big books were with this kind of font faces. But in fact, all the eye tracking are showing that sans serif is definitely the most readable now. Serif is great too. Like the difference is not a lot. It's just that if you want to to have the optimal experience for someone, sans serif, or even like better, like monospaced font, which is the thing blowing my mind every time. But monospaced fonts are better for dyslexic people because like there is this grid and it's just easier to detect what is an M from an N, for example. So please don't do all your website in monospaced font because like it's readable, but it's not the best. It's definitely not, at least the nicer font faces, but sans serif is a good one. And in all the studies, like Helvetica was always one of the best one. And it's not about the shape of the letters. In fact, that serification is just harder to read for the eyes. It's just the fact that we're used to now having a web with sans serif everywhere. So we also trained our eyes like during all these years to read this kind of font faces. And that's why they are like the most readable font nowadays. But italic is a nightmare for readability. So the idea is more to use like colors and bold, we will see that, to show and to really put the focus on specific information. But yeah, so sans serif, Roman, and monospaced fonts are the best to increase the reading performance. And this one is like always a struggle to discuss with my dear designer friends. But like the most optimal font size is around 14 points, which means in pixels, something like 18 pixels. And it's really like somewhere around, because if you, like I've put two different studies that you can access from the slide. The first one was made in 2007, which is kind of old now, but it was suggesting like 12 to 14 points, so 16 to 18, and that's where the 16 font size came from and was used as a standard for a lot of websites. But like for dyslexic friendly websites, especially heavy in content for websites, this study is showing like the size matters study is showing that it's more like 18 points. And if you're doing more than 18 points, so 18 points, it's 22 pixels, I think. Yeah, 22 pixels. Everything above that is not more readable. It's not degrading the experience, but it's not more readable. So let's not make our websites with 22 pixels, like that would be a bit complex for the design, but at least that's one of the reasons why we need to offer the way that you can zoom in your devices. And that's one of the issue in this, is the fact that yes, obviously we can all zoom. Like in our browser, we can just do Command Plus, for example, and zooming. But the Norman Nissel Group made like a study on this, seeing if people are zooming with this. And unfortunately, laziness or not getting access to the information that it's possible to do that, people are not always doing it, even when they struggle to read, if there is not an easy way to do it on the website. Because our brain don't think about solutions sometimes if we're not in front of the solution. So that's why it's important, font size, bigger the better. And you can see that after 18, it's basically the same. But yeah, it's more complex for 10 points, and especially with a bigger variation. And the line spacing, in fact, appears to have like a really few impacts on readability. That's one of the things that I'm always surprised about, but there is several studies now showing that even if we have the feeling that it's more readable because there is more space in the paragraph, in fact, the impact on the energy that you need to spend reading a text, yeah, is not so big. So basically, if I can like have a quotation from the researcher who made the study, is the fact that size matters, but spacing does not, except when it does. So not for the line height, but it's really important for, okay. But it's really important first because we need resting space. It's what we see before with the small break. We're like doing saccade fixation, and then having a break. For that, you need white space. But also because you need to understand what is going together. And for this, you need like white space, but not too much to really understand what blocks are going together. And like there is now good guidelines on this, with the fact that a good guideline for line spacing is 1.4 times like the font size, and 2 times for the paragraph spacing. So basically you need to let one full like line height between a paragraph and the next one. So this was for really like macro typography on a really word level, but there is also like the paragraph itself, and here it's more complex, especially when we're discussing about like the size of a line. There is always this big debate between 60 characters per line to 120, depending on the article that you're reading. So yeah, narrower is better for readability. It's clearly the case, because you need less effort, you can go back easily to the next line, you can easily look for information and analyze. But in all the studies, when we were not like checking exactly what are the fixation duration, but asking just people, how do you feel about the paragraph? Most of the time people, if they have the choice, were going for something really wider, because it's not more readable, but it's giving you the impression that there is less content. It's doing less line. So you're like, yeah, it's smaller, so I will spend less energy to find my information, even if in the end there is exactly the same number of words. So it's complex, but a good compromise most of the time is around 80 characters per line. It's not too big, so people can still know where they are in a line, but at the same time, it's not like too small, so people don't have the impression that it's really a lot of information. Other really important thing, using bold and colors, because you cannot really, if you want to be highly readable, you cannot use italic. Like it's changing too much the shape of a word, and especially with letters like I, which is completely different between, most of the time between like a Roman font and an italic one. It's even the case with A, for example. In some font faces, like it's a completely different design for the letters. So that's one of the reasons why italic should be avoided. Instead, bold and colors, it's a really good way to get someone, like to show to someone that this information is really important. And italic is to avoid, but also underlining. First, because it's a link. If it's with an underline, people will see it's a link. But also because when you have like underlines too close from the letters, you can just impact the shape of the word. And sometimes with some font faces, it can be quite hard to see like in letters if it's a G or a P next to another one, because like the end of the loop will be directly on the line. So you will just see the fact that there is 2 bars going at the bottom of the letter. So it's not always highly readable. There is a way to avoid that, which is what Chrome is doing natively, I think, which is having stop, like to stop the letter, like to stop the line just before and just after the letter. So you always have some white space in between, which is really good for, in this case, readability, because you can see the word, but which can be quite hard for some users, because if you're not used to, like one of the comments coming most of the time is it another link or is it the same? Because there is a break in the line. So quite interesting to see how you can solve that, but most of the time, except for link, try to just avoid underline. And I said it before, no uppercase or even small caps, because small caps is exactly the same issue. You will just have like a big one at the beginning of the word and then a block of letters. So really hard to identify what exactly is the word. And my favorite one, please, please, please never disallow highlighting on a text. It's something we find like on a lot of websites, surprisingly, but it's really important. First, because lower literacy is sometimes about just lack of fluency. So you need to get access to the text and to copy paste into any translation system. But also because some users are using the highlighting system to just follow the text, to understand where you are in a text, what is exactly your position, what did you read or not. So highlighting is not only just to copy paste the text, it's just also to keep track of the information. And basically, it's a default behavior. Don't change default behavior. And one of the last for the micro content, avoiding generate content. It's also really important for readability, not only for screen readers, because on a link, if you just read more, like a link will be with color and underline. It will be eye-catchy. Like the conspicuity that we were like seeing before, it's definitely what a link is. So if the only thing that you're seeing on the page is going from bold text to like link because it's shiny, it's with color and underline, if you just read more, you still don't have access to the information. Especially with user of lower literacy, because one of the things with lower literacy is the fact that what you're seeing on the screen is narrower for your brain, so you get a more difficult access to the information. So even finding the title can be sometimes more challenging. So link with content, meaningful content. On a more layout level, the text alignment is really, really, really important. And because our languages, like in Western countries, most of the time, like left to right, aligning on the left, it's the only way for someone to see where I should go when the line is done. So going on the next line on the left, because that's where the paragraph is. And that's one of the reasons why we should avoid having centered text except for title, because you will never know for sure when the line begins. And the justification is the same with the right edge. Like if you look somewhere else for a few seconds, the way to get access to the information again is to know where were you on the paragraph. So to see the shape of the paragraph and knowing that you were somewhere around this place. But if it's justified, you don't know. It's just a huge block of text. And when there is reverse, it's even worse because like you really don't know where you were and where the sentence ends because there's just like white weird part everywhere. So justification is a pain, always, except on print because you can manage it. But on the web, please, justification is really a pain. And it's a bit the same with multicolons. Like it's shiny, we can use it with CSS. It's quite amazing. It's well supported, but for readability, most of the time it's complicated because on design, multicolon is most of the time used to have like really narrow texts. But narrower can be sometimes really complex, especially if it's only 20 or 25 characters per line. But also, it's confusing because if you don't have a lot of content, you will have, for example, 5 lines and then 5 lines on the other side. Like it's not easily understandable that things are going together. Our brain is trained to see like content as groups. There is one group, another group. You see 2 columns, you're thinking about 2 different contents. So that's one of the reasons why multi-column sometimes, like when it's not newspapers, can be really hard to understand for someone which is not having all the knowledge of the culture of a specific language. And related to that, group the small related content together with a strong visual system more than columns. If you're doing columns, it's not for the same text. It's for different type of information grouped together. And really important, like heading and information hierarchy. And what we can see from the eye tracking from before, one of the really interesting stuff for me is the fact that people were mainly reading like the 2 first line of each paragraph. And it's the same for title, because the only thing you can be sure about is the fact that people will read the first word of a title, and then they will do a saccade. You will not know if the saccade is going at the end of the line or to the next word, but they will read the first word. And this is where you should have the information. So in the first 2 paragraphs, so people can find it, but also starting the heading with really the word carrying most of the information. And because people are mainly analyzing pages, the idea is also to break up the content with a lot of headings, because that's the best way for people to get access to what is the meaning of the different paragraph. If you see a title with something interesting for you, you read the paragraph. If you just see one title and then like 7 or 8 different paragraphs, most of the time you will not know what to expect from this text. So really important for readability. And because you cannot be like, you cannot detect what will be the title in a page. You need outline. Like you just at the beginning, that's what Wikipedia is doing, for example, to offer the best reading experience, even if the design of Wikipedia is highly not readable. But like they're offering an outline, because the idea is to say, this is the information that you will find. If you want something specific, you can just go there and get it. And for all of that, one of the ideas is just to use HTML and to design accordingly, because people have expectation. For example, lists are amazing for readability, but in this case, please use a list. It means having a sign, a bullet point, or a number, and also using it in HTML, because most of the people, and especially like dyslexic people, are also using screen readers to get access to the information, especially on long texts. So in this case, they need to understand what is like the content and what's the shape of the content and how to easily navigate to it. So just use HTML and design accordingly to match the expectation, because they're like dyslexic people most of the time are sighted people. So they can have the screen reader and see the page at the same time. And this is where, when you use a semantic, you need to design accordingly. And really important, especially also with cognitive disabilities like autism, for example, it's to keep consistent layouts. Because you will never know like how people will find information. Once they found a way to get access to information, they will just like reuse the same pattern. So they will expect between different pages to get access to the same kind of information at the same place. Consistency. And that's why like a lot of blogs in like the early ages of internet were using this kind of 2-column system. Like there is a really old studies from 2001, I think, or something like this, showing that one of the most readable pattern on web pages is having like this 2/3, 1/3 kind of layout. 2/3 with like the main information and the main content, and 1/3 with just like information more or less related to what you're currently reading. So people can just focus and narrow all their energy into the main column. So most important content in a single main column. And related to that, because you will never know how people will find information, the idea is also to simplify the navigation as possible. Big menus are amazing to find information when you know what you're looking for, but when you don't know exactly how a website is like created and what is exactly the information architecture, like you need help. And most of the users will not open a menu to see like the help. They just want help. And so that's why like having linear menus with at least the main choices is something quite important also for readability, because people will see this. It's big, it's on the top. You will see what is the website about. It's also readability. And because most of the time you're never sure that people will get access to the information in the way that you are thinking, this is not the only way to access an information. The best thing is to provide at least a second one, like a second different way to access the same information. On an home page, for example, it's having at the top like the navigation with project, workshop, blah, blah, blah. And then if you start reading, because people just don't always know what they're looking for, having another way to get access sometimes to the same links. Just because it's not the same context. First, someone who wants to know about workshop can directly go on it. But in fact, if they don't really know what they're looking for, it's quite interesting to give more context and then to trigger like some interest, and then to say again, by the way, there is a way to access more information over there, but not by saying read more, please. And one of the last thing is adopting an inclusive writing style, and like inclusive in a lot of way. In this one, it's the idea that to be easily understandable by people, you need to change sometimes the way that you're writing texts. One of the first thing is, and one of the most readable thing is using active voice, because that's first one of the most easier to translate for automatic translation tool. So people, whatever they level in the language, can get access to it, but also because even for people, like for everybody, it's the easiest way to understand a sentence. The active voice. And especially if you're using short and simple sentence in a direct style, because one more time, easily translatable. But if it's easily translatable, it's understanding by everybody. So active voice, short and simple. And if you can use images, graphics, and rich media to support your content, it's even better, because you can just like offer a lot of different ways to access the same information. more the merrier on this one. And a list is always clearer than a paragraph. So most of the time when you have like a lot of information, there is a rule of thumb for that, which is if you have like more than 4 or 5 information in a paragraph, just go for a list. It will be like easily scannable by people, so they can get access to like the main element of the information. And if they want to know more, you can always add more paragraph after. Like a good way, title, starting with a list of information, and then giving more information after in paragraphs. And I know that at least like in France, we love abbreviation for everything, but that's a nightmare because like it's highly cultural. So if you don't have access to like the degree of culture, like the knowledge of the culture that you're living in, for example, or if you just are not technical enough about the domain that you're trying to get information, it's not understandable. So abbreviation, domain-specific jargon, and my nightmare in English, double negatives. Like, I don't know who invented that, but that's a nightmare. Because like most of the time you need to reread like several times to get access to it. First, because like dyslexia is not the best way to read a sentence, so you need to restart. But then because, was it a negative? Was it a double negative? But are you sure? So like, people, double negative, never, 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 ever. So these are like most of the readable, like the readability improvement that you can do on text. But outside of that, there is always experiences next to texts. Like text is never alone on the websites. And try to propose distraction-free. Like basically try to avoid that. And obviously it's, yes, it's working. So it's a French website. But despite the language, like it's almost impossible to get access to the information. Everything is moving. Like my brain is going in all directions. There is taxis, there is signs, there is cars, there is everything, except the form. Like there is a form, but there is issues also with placeholder, but there is a form, and it's not a good experience because, especially if you have users with ADHD, it's going in all directions. It's opening a lot of doors. So please try to be careful with distractions. And this is maybe like obvious, but sometimes it's about this. Like I'm trying to look for my next, 2 years ago, but I tried to look for the next weekend. And I had like this really nice person here, like over there, trying to discuss with me. And I'm like, yeah, no, thank you. Like you're nice, but no, thank you. Like I just want to focus on what is my next experience. So like just try to be careful with this. And it's not only an accessibility issue. It was like starting with sound in the middle of a workplace, which is always amazing. But also like it can be an open door for a lot of people to exit your website because, oh, this person is saying something and it's made me think about something else. So I'm just going to find information and coming back or not. Let's see. But trying to avoid this kind of stuff. And also, in my case, because remember, in general, I try never to speak with people. So even people in videos. One of the other way to do distraction-free experiences is to avoid like this kind of thing. Like there is a text, and despite the fact that there is a video, but this one is not too visible, so it's quite nice. It's just like moving automatically to something else without asking me to go to the next slide. And that's one of the things. There's not a lot of text. So you could say that, yeah, people have time to read, but you never know. Because if someone needs to translate and to copy paste and to go somewhere else, coming back on your website, where's the content I was looking for? So you can never do assumption on the time needed by someone to get access and to understand your content. And this is something we need to be really careful about because the web is full of timed experience. And my favorite one, and I'm really sorry if there's content people, the scissors. Cut the unnecessary content. Remove half of your content. You can always remove half of your content. And even when you removed half of your content, you can remove again half of it. There is always too much content, way too much content. So if you want to provide something clearly readable, just cut. That's something a lot of websites start to do now with term of services, for example. It's like offering one of the version which is with half or less of the content. Just saying, this is what you will get access to. This is what you engage yourself to. So this is the same for all your content. I discussed with like a Dutch municipality like a few days ago in the conference, and that was one of the challenges. They were like, I cannot cut my content. Everything is important for people. It's about law. But yes, you can. You can always offer an abstract at the beginning saying, basically, you want to renew your passport. This is, in most of the case, what you need. This, and this. And then offering all the content after. You can always find a way to provide two different experiences depending on the time needed by people or the level of literacy that they have. You're in an airport, you want to go on your company, like airline, and to get access to the number of baggage, you can just check in because you're in front of the check-in counter and you're not sure anymore. You need to get access just to this information and not to all of the explanation. So always find a way to remove a lot of content. So to finish on this quite slowly, sorry for that, you can easily experience with mouse heat map. So one of the first thing is this. It's not the best, but most of the time people are using their mouse to follow what they're reading. So it's always a good indication on where is activity on your page when you cannot do eye tracking, because eye tracking is complex. But you can have this kind of thing. So it's from a previous work that I've made, and we were looking on how people get access, like what people were looking for during out of stock moment in an e-commerce website. We were like offering information about when the product will be back in stock, and we wanted to know what were people interested by. And we can see that there is activity, but not a lot. But at the end of the page, there are like a lot of activity. And when you see that, it's the moment where you can like think about the readability of your page and what you can do. And what you can do is not always taking this paragraph and putting it at the top, because one of the risks is that people will not continue to get access to other information because they got the information. But what you can do is just like taking the information that people were especially looking for, like here it was to find a reseller partner, and saying at the top, in an introduction paragraph, that you can find this product in reseller partner, but you can also learn why you need to wait, and having all the information after explaining you why you need to wait on this website before getting it. And then just finding a way to push people to stay on the page by explaining what will be the content. You get your answer, but you can also know more about it. So this kind of solution can be a way to not move always the content and not sacrifice what's in between if you're just like moving what is attracting the attention. The second way to experiment is to use a screen reader. Like, especially on Mac, for example, if you have VoiceOver, you can use like visually the web rotor, which is basically this. So the idea that you can have a list of, is it working? A list of all the landmark and all the title. So for example, you can do the list of headings, and I know there is an H6, but not H4, 5 in between, but all the links, and you can see this information without the context. So you can easily spot if there is a read more somewhere, or if there is something which is important, but not understandable without the context. And in this case, you can use ARIA label or this kind of stuff to provide information just for the screen reader, if you want to really narrow this to the screen reader. Or you can just like go back to this, think about the copy, and find another way to provide this information in a better way, which is not read more. So using the web rotor, for example, it's really amazing on Mac on this. You can do the same with NVIDIA, with JAWS. Just use it. And yeah, I was not sure that it was so I created like the different things. The last one is something which is working really great in English, really badly in a lot of other languages, but it's calculating readability scores. Basically, a readability, like there is, you just type readability scores on Google and you will find a lot of websites doing it for you. But basically, there is like a lot of different scale that you can use. The most known is the Flash reading e-score. And the idea is that most of these reading scales are trying to match the text that you're writing with an age needed to understand it. For example, like I tried with a blog post, which was a technical one, and the idea that it was difficult to read. Because basically you need to be in college or 12th grade, or 18, 19 years old to understand what is the context and what is the text about. And it's not about the vocabulary that you're using, because like there is no dictionary used for that. It's only based on the idea that the language is phonological. So it's only based on the idea of seeing the average size of word, the average number of syllables, and the average number of word per sentences, and the average number of sentences per paragraph. And using this to understand, is it really easy to understand or not? It's not always precise, but it's a good like information to get about your text. And most of the time, if you're like using active voice, using like smart and concise sentences, you will have something highly readable. But it's a good try to just like run your website into this and to see also not always having like the most readable one, but just to see where people can struggle and identify what are the content that you can work on. And to finish, I have some good example for you. The first one is, sorry for the contrast, the green is terrible, but everything else is great. But the green is really terrible. It was an advocate website that they made. So it's me controlling the scroll, but the idea is the fact that they had illustrations with animation, but the animation was never longer than 1 second, and then it was done. The text is mainly lists with huge title, using almost no uppercase. Like, if you really like don't think about the green, which is terrible, it's highly readable. So that's one of the good things that you can do, which is stylish. Like it's quite nice to see, but at the same time, it's readable. There is a lot of work made into this, and you can find information. Smashing Magazine, which I love more than anything else on the website, on the web, is also having something quite readable. I'm really sorry for the quality of the export in HTML, but something highly readable. And for that, they're using a lot of bold and colors. They're using with more, but we had this discussion. It will be better. But that's nice. Like that's using bold, that's using huge title, a lot of white space, and it's still like having a personality. So you can do design which is readable and nice at the same time. And even with a lot of colors, like, yeah, we cannot really see here, but there is a lot of tags going together because having the same style. So they managed to create an experience which is highly readable. Offscreen, which is coming back this summer, which is quite nice too, is also doing the same with blocks of colors to easily, just when you scroll, see where is the information, what is going together. Like it's quite interesting to see this kind of big blocks of colors, using also like illustration when there is too much white space, but also providing information about stockists. So it's an illustration of a shop. And a lot of small information going together. We cannot see it here, but there is a gray background and then white specific blocks. And the idea is also to create this idea of content going together because the same purpose. And the last one is terrible. It's an e-commerce website, but I wanted to show that on e-commerce, it's quite nice that you can also do something highly readable. It's a really, really long page, you will see, but even with a really low quality, you can see that, no, you cannot, that there is like huge title, small paragraph, a lot of images related directly to the product. Like they played a lot. I haven't seen these big pixels for years. They played a lot with like huge title, giving you exactly the information that you're looking at. And if you really want to know more, there is like 1 or 2 lines. And you will see that it's a really, really, really long page. Like here with the list, for example. And yeah, I realize that it's using significant memory. But like it's a really long page, starting with a lot of pictures, and they're using uppercase, but it's still highly readable because it's on title with every time 1, 2, or 3 words. So even on e-commerce, when you have like a lot of information and you want to sell your product, and there is a lot of things that you want to say, you can still do something highly readable. And you cannot see it, but it's written ready for adventure. So are you ready for the adventure of readability now? And merci beaucoup. Tak, thank you, bedankt, all the languages that I can say a few words in. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we have some time for Q&A right now, so if you have any questions, just wave and I'll give you the microphone and we can have some questions.
That was not readable as a presentation. A lot of information.
Hello. I'm just curious what you would say is the biggest blocker that you see on websites now in terms of preventing readability. Is there like a common theme that's happening everywhere?
Yes. It's not about the text itself for me. It's really about the layout. And the fact that like more and more, especially on e-commerce, we're like breaking the layout and trying to do experiences with like text flooding everywhere. We're back from the what was the name of this? Like when the scroll was not going at the same direction, at the same speed. That yeah, the parallax. We're done with the parallax here. So this is an amazing thing, and I'm really glad about that. But like basically layout, like the fact that we're breaking more and more the layout. You can do amazing stuff with grids and CSS grids, and it's really amazing because it's bringing back a lot of creativity in the web. But we need to be careful and to bring creativity back, but still by having a layout which is readable. And that's what is worrying me the worst, like the most these days, because when people like when you see all the books about like the trends in the print industry, you can see that too, that at one point like the style was like going in all direction and you were like breaking the layout and doing things like going outside of the page, and like because like we had like print capabilities where now we can do like different format of paper into the same book and having like folding and all this kind of stuff. So people were creating like crazy stuff but not helping the readability. And on the web, I'm really have the thing that these days we're doing on the same, like breaking the layout, breaking the information into small pieces, going in a lot of different places of the pages. And this is not an easy way to find information for people. So being creative, but still thinking about the fact that people mainly want to look for information.
How do you resolve other accessibility challenges? There's this like recommendation that you underline all links for readability, but you said that can make readability difficult for dyslexia, and also using color to provide contrast instead of italics or some other style when people have color blindness, those kind of things.
Accessibility is complicated. Like that's always a thing, but that's most of the time one of the issue is like there is no one fits all solution, and one of the way for me now and more like where the web should go for me is having like being entirely on the customization model, and the CSS custom properties are offering a nice way to go in this direction now, and this is for me the way that you can easily like solve for a lot of different impairment and accessibility issues, because yeah, it will be always complicated. Like there is one thing I have in mind which is like really funny for me. It's like we have like guidelines in WCAG saying at one point we need to be careful with providing not we need to be careful, but the guidelines are making complex the idea of having rich medias, because like there is a lot of challenges with rich media, but at the same time the best way to make a content readable is to not use text, so to use rich media. So there is no good answer for me on how to make a choice between guidelines, but that's also like one of the reasons why in the WCAG, for example, there is really few guidelines regarding cognitive impairment. There is a bit more now with the 2.1. They added some interesting ones, but there is always this struggle in the fact that even between disabilities, cognitive disabilities and impairment, it's complicated because like you want a higher contrast if you want to be WCAG compliant. But at the same time, like for autism and dyslexia, you need to be careful with contrast. It can be hurtful, at least it can hurt the experience of autistic users, for example. But that's really where, for me, the answer is customization. We need to offer customization, and the only way to have everybody having the best experience is to listen what are the settings into the different systems. For example, and I was showing a lot about videos and all this kind of stuff and animations, like for example the Avocad with a lot of animations. You can use the media query in CSS, prefer reduced motion. And this is the kind of stuff now that we need to push more for also as an accessibility community to explain to like now the WHAT working group and the W3C, because they're working together now, to explain that we need more of this. We need more of the custom media queries. That's amazing that there is CSS custom properties. But we need also help on this, because if each website is using, for example, its own variable system, like we can miss something, which is having a standard in the industry of what should be the variables. Because in this case, if there is a standard in industry for variables, people could just have like override of styles and variables in their browsers. If like Windows is having the same reduced motion media query as Mac, in this case, we can easily offer a way for people to not have access to the animation, triggering vestibular disorder, for example, and like nausea and all this, like nauseous people and all this kind of stuff. The same, and like I'm saying that Mac is great on this side, but Windows is also doing amazing stuff with the inverted color system, and like all this kind of night mode is the same kind of idea. It's the fact that providing ways for people to customize. And in this case, in the way that we're building our website, we need to listen all the settings through CSS and to adapt our experience. And for me, that's more the answer on this.
Hi, so you advocate enabling customization. Would you say we should have a plus button, a minus button to control font size, a night mode, a day mode to control contrast, and then a low accessibility button that would be like 5 buttons on your website before you've done anything?
That's complicated. It's like my favorite answer to every question is it's complicated. But it's complicated because a lot of people don't know that they can increase and decrease the font size in the browser. So this button is legitimate. But at the same time, changing color is also legitimate to have like this. So yes, but I would say no. Like for me, the best way would be to have my dream. I would say this way. I would love for people when they get a new computer to have a real onboarding on what is how to use their browser. The fact that you can change the font size here. The fact that you can override something here. And having, for example, for overriding is really complex in browsers nowadays. Like you need to know CSS to override some information or to use plugins, when this could and should be part of the browser itself. To say that when you start, like when you install your Firefox, for example, and please use Firefox. It's really terrible what is happening these days, but please use Firefox, Chrome and all this kind of stuff. So in Firefox, for example, it could be great that when you install this browser, you have like a first interaction with it, which is, what would you prefer? Like, do you really want the white screen? Or when there is a white background, do you prefer having yellow, for example, because it's better for readability? And then offering this kind of question, what is the base font size that you want to have on your website? Is it really 16 pixel? Like we will all age. And like, I'm not the only one with glasses tonight. So, and I'm really wishing that you will not need glasses for all the other people after, but we will age. And we will also need like bigger font sizes. So offering a way right at the beginning to customize would be a way to avoid on websites, to have like all these multiple button and accessibility widgets, which are most of the time nightmare, but helpful because there is no other way to improve like the experience. But it's not only the browser to fix that, it's also, and I'm back on CSS, people to do this also on the CSS side, to listen with the media queries on what are the different settings, and to like do CSS in a way that it's not blocking people to override with specific custom styles. So I would say, yeah, it's a great solution now, but it should be a browser specific setting and not plugins. Sorry, I'm always doing long answers.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for all the information you're sharing. It's very, very helpful and insightful. I read recently that you were certified in web accessibility and wanted to ask if you could share what that process was like.
Like there is a no, we cannot call that a union, but there is an internationalization of accessibility professionals, the IAAP, and basically you can like, I think twice a year or 3 times a year, something like this, you can join like a certification session, and there is 75 questions, mainly tech. Like there is 2 kind of certification. I've passed the tech one. It's really techy. So it's really about WCAG, like all the technical implementation way for ARIA, for example, for all this kind of stuff. So it's really, really technical. It was a bit I've learned stuff, I must say, that when doing the certification, that few questions I was like, okay, like why not? But so it's a really technical one based mainly on the code. It's just that it's required by some companies, especially if you want to work on full accessible positions, and that's definitely where I'm trying to go with like my current career. It can be useful, but aside of that, if you think you need it for your career, it's quite nice and do it. But if you want to at least just to know more about accessibility, I never know how to pronounce that in English, but DECAC, the big corporation doing accessibility training, accessibility workshop, and a university, like an online university, is providing a lot of content. And basically, if you don't want to pay for the certification, you can just access all the information on this platform and self-train yourself. I would not say that it's just great, and I was happy because like imposter syndromes, and that's when I saw someone saying like basically you know shit about things, but so that was great for me, and that solved one of my personal issues. But because it's still a cost, and I'm really glad that my company paid for it, I would just say that if it's about knowing what your knowledge is and just being like more comfortable with your skills, it's amazing. If it's about getting the skills, the Cake University, it's absolutely amazing, and they have a sponsorship system. So if you have any kind of disability, you can access it for free, because the idea is that people should be empowered with their impairment, and also to use that in their professional career if they want to. So yeah, I definitely need to do like smaller answers.
Any other questions?
Could you spell
Wait,
the name
just
of that? Could you spell the name of that university?
Yeah. Yep. Ta-da. Sorry for the... Okay. I cannot have both at the same screen at the same time, but like DECAC University, and yeah, there is online courses, and yeah, if you have any kind of disability, Dyslexia is part of the list. You can access it for free, so it's just amazing. Yeah. Sorry.
Actually, I just want to add, DQ is also the engine that runs Lightning for Google
Axe,
Accessibility and also Microsoft Accessibility.
Yeah, they're doing a tremendous work. Like the Axe plugin is absolutely amazing, and you can use it in all the technical stack. So there is plugin for React, there is plugin for Angular, there is plugin for directly in the browser. Like the tool made by Microsoft that you were mentioning is absolutely tremendous. Like it's like one of the best plugin you can find, because not only it's doing like the automatic checks, but it's also offering you a way to do the full accessibility audit by yourself. So it's explaining you what do you need to test and how to test it. So yeah, like they're not only the university, like the online university, but they're doing a tremendous job. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Damien. I really appreciate this presentation. And we have some time for some networking and mingling afterwards, after we finish up the stream. So if you have any other questions or want to speak one-on-one or get to know some of the folks in the room, please stick around. One quick announcement. We actually have 2 meetups in June. So we have one scheduled for June 13th, data visualization, tips for making complex graphical content accessible to all. So I hope you all will be there, and keep in touch with us through our Meetup webpage. If you're not members, I hope you'll consider joining, and all the information for future events will be on that page. But I hope you'll join me in thanking Damien again for a presentation, and we'll see you next time.